The ashes were still warm when Felicity Marlowe opened the front door. She smelled it before she saw its scorched silk, the acrid tang of burning dye, the wrongness of something beautiful being destroyed. Her stepmother stood before the fireplace in the drawing room, backlit by flames that danced too high, feeding the last shred of midnight blue fabric into the fire with long brass tongs. The woman's laughter was high and bright, the kind that cut like crystal shattering. "You should see your face," Victoria said, not even turning around, "like I've murdered someone." Felicity's throat closed. She dropped her shopping bag, just bread and cheap tea, the only things they'd sent her out for, and crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of reaching into the flames herself. The gown was gone. Completely gone. She could see a scrap of the beaded bodice curling black at the edges, the delicate silver threading she'd sewn on by hand over 6 months of late nights melting into nothing. "That was mine," Felicity whispered. "That was presumption," Victoria corrected, finally turning. Her stepmother was beautiful in the way Frost was beautiful, pale and sharp and cold. She set the tongs aside with deliberate care. "You actually thought you'd wear it to the Ventress reception, as if you had any right to be seen in the same room as your betters." Felicity's hands curled into fists at her sides. "I was invited. By mistake." Victoria's smile was a blade, or pity, probably both. "Did you really think Lord Ventress meant to include the help when he sent invitations to this address? You're not family, Felicity. You're the debt I inherited when I married your father, and he had the good sense to die before he could see what a disappointment you turned out to be." The words landed like blows, each one precise. Felicity had heard variations on this theme for 3 years, since her father's heart had given out and left her alone with Victoria and her 2 daughters. But tonight, the words came with specific weight, designed to hurt in specific places. "That invitation was addressed to me," Felicity said quietly. "My name was on the envelope. Written by some secretary who didn't know any better." Victoria examined her nails, pale pink and perfect. "I've corrected the error. Sent your regrets. Explained that you were unwell." Her eyes flicked up, cold and satisfied. "Which you will be if you continue this conversation." Felicity felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept her face still. She'd learned that much, at least never let Victoria see the wound. "I spent 6 months on that dress." "Then you wasted 6 months." Victoria crossed to the sideboard, poured herself wine from a crystal decanter Felicity's father had bought in happier times. "You have work in the morning. The Harrington account needs reconciling, and someone has to manage the household expenses since you're apparently the only one in this house who can count." She sipped, considering. "Though if you could count properly, you might have noticed you can't afford to play dress-up with your betters. I paid for the fabric myself." "With what money?" Victoria's laugh was sharp again. "Oh, darling, everything you earn goes into this household. You don't have money. You have what I permit you to have, which is a roof over your ungrateful head and food in your ungrateful mouth." She gestured with her glass toward the stairs. "Go to bed. I'm tired of looking at you." Felicity should have left then. Should have turned and walked away, climbed the narrow stairs to her attic room, and cried quietly into her pillow like she'd done 100 times before. But something in her, something that had been bending for 3 years without breaking, finally went rigid. "I'm not property," she said. Victoria went very still. "Excuse me? You heard me." Felicity's voice was steady even though her hands shook. "I'm not property. I'm not a debt. I'm a person, and I'm done being treated like—" The slap came fast, sharp enough to snap Felicity's head to the side. She tasted blood where her teeth had cut her cheek. "You're done when I say you're done," Victoria said, her voice dropping to something low and dangerous. "And you'll be grateful for it, you insolent little leech. Do you know what would have happened to you if I hadn't taken you in? You'd be on the street. You'd be nothing." She leaned in close, wine-sweet breath hot against Felicity's face. "You are nothing, a burden, a mistake, a pathetic, worthless creature who should be on her knees, thanking me for every scrap I throw your way." 12 words, 12 specific chosen insults, delivered like a prosecutor laying out evidence. Felicity didn't cry, didn't speak. She turned and walked out of the room, climbed the stairs with her spine straight and her head high, and only when she was safely behind her locked door did she let herself slide down to the floor and shake. The dress was gone. Her only pretty thing. Her only proof that she could make something beautiful. Her only ticket to a world beyond this house and these people who hated her for existing. Gone. She didn't know someone had been watching from the street. Didn't know that pale eyes had observed the scene through the drawing room window, drawn by the smell of burning fabric and the sound of casual cruelty. Didn't know that the vampire king of the Obscura court, ancient and cold and precise, had witnessed every moment and filed each insult away with the methodical attention he gave to all debts that required settling. She only knew that when morning came, she dragged herself from her room with her cheeks still tender and her eyes dry of tears, and found the household in chaos. The front hallway was full of boxes, 12 of them stacked in neat pairs, each one wrapped in heavy black paper and sealed with red wax that bore a sigil. Felicity didn't recognize a crown above a crescent moon, elegant and ancient. Her stepsisters, Beatrice and Cecilia, were tearing into one of the boxes with the graceless enthusiasm of children on Christmas morning, scattering tissue paper everywhere while Victoria stood frozen in the doorway to the drawing room, her face bloodless. "What is this?" Felicity asked. Beatrice looked up, blonde curls bouncing. "Dresses! Someone sent dresses!" She held up a gown of deep crimson silk, cut in a style Felicity recognized from fashion magazines she couldn't afford, elegant, modern, and utterly exquisite. "Why would anyone send dresses here?" "They're not for you," Victoria said, her voice strangled. "What?" Victoria crossed the hall in 3 strides and snatched the dress from Beatrice's hands, shoving it back into its box. "They're not for any of us. Look at the card." There was a small envelope attached to the first box, heavy cream paper with Felicity's name written in black ink and a hand so precise it looked printed. Felicity picked it up with shaking fingers, broke the seal, and read, "Miss Marlowe, 1 for each word. Wear them all or burn them all. The choice is yours. They are yours regardless. CL, CL." Cecilia peered over Felicity's shoulder. "Who's CL?" Victoria made a sound like a trapped animal. "Get away from those boxes, all of you, now." But Felicity was already opening the nearest one, and what she found inside stole her breath. The gown was midnight blue, the exact shade of the dress Victoria had burned, but infinitely finer. The silk was so soft it felt like water under her fingers, the beading so intricate it must have taken a master craftsman weeks to complete. And pinned to the bodice was a small tag, the same precise handwriting as the card. Not property. Felicity's hands went numb. She opened the next box with clumsy fingers. This gown was silver gray, elegant and understated, with a tag that read, "Not a debt." The third, deepest emerald, tagged a person. The fourth, rose gold, shimmering. Not a leech. Each gown more beautiful than the last, each tag bearing one of the insults Victoria had thrown at her the night before, refuted with 2 or 3 words and the weight of someone who'd heard everything and decided it required correction. Not nothing, not a burden, not a mistake, not pathetic, not worthless, not ungrateful, not unworthy. The 12th gown was pure white, simple and devastating in its elegance, tagged with just 2 words. "Remember this." Felicity looked up at Victoria, who had backed against the wall, her face chalk white and her hands trembling. "Who sent these?" "It doesn't matter," Victoria whispered. "Send them back, right now. We're sending them back." "Like hell we are," Beatrice said, reaching for the crimson gown again. "If someone wants to send us, they're not for us." Victoria's voice cracked into a shriek. "Can't you read? They're for her, and we're sending them back before—" She cut herself off, breathing hard. "Before what?" Felicity asked quietly. Victoria's eyes were wild. "You don't understand. You don't know who—" She swallowed hard. "The Obscura court doesn't give gifts. They don't do favors. Everything they do is a transaction, and if one of them has decided to pay attention to you, we're all in danger." "The Obscura court," Felicity repeated slowly. "Vampire court." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Everyone knew about vampires. They'd been part of society for as long as anyone could remember, living in their own districts, managing their own affairs, powerful and wealthy and separate. But the courts themselves were mysterious, dangerous, governed by rules that didn't apply to humans. And the Obscura court was the oldest, the most powerful, ruled by a king whose name people didn't say out loud if they could help it. "Why would the vampire court care about me?" Felicity asked. Victoria laughed, a horrible broken sound. Because your father was an idiot who borrowed money he couldn't repay, and when he died, the debt transferred to me, and I've been—" She stopped, seemed to realize she was saying too much. "It doesn't matter. We're sending the gowns back. All of them, immediately." "No," Felicity said. "What?" "No." Felicity picked up the white gown, held it against her chest. "They're mine. The card says so, and I'm keeping them." Victoria moved fast, crossing the space between them and grabbing Felicity's wrist hard enough to bruise. "You stupid girl. You don't know what you're doing. If you accept these, you're accepting his attention, and if he's paying attention to you, then he knows about—" "Again," she stopped, breathing hard. "Send them back, please." It was the please that confirmed it. Victoria never said please, never begged, never showed fear, not like this. "What debt?" Felicity asked. "What did father borrow?" Victoria's grip tightened, enough to keep us alive when the business failed, enough to buy time, and I've been managing it, I've been handling it, but if the king decides to call it in—" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They'll take everything, the house, the accounts, you." "Me?" "The contract allows for collateral." Victoria's eyes were desperate now, calculating. "Human collateral, if the debt can't be satisfied in coin. I've been negotiating, keeping them at bay, but if you've caught the king's attention—" "You were going to use me to pay father's debt," Felicity said slowly. The pieces were falling into place, ugly and sharp. "That's why you've kept me here, why you've never let me leave, never let me have anything of my own. You've been planning to hand me over." "It's not like that." "What's it like then?" Felicity yanked her wrist free. "Tell me, what were you going to do? Sell me to some vampire lord to clear father's account?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. Beatrice made a small sound of shock. "Mother, you can't—" "Quiet!" Victoria snapped. Then, to Felicity. "It was supposed to be managed, handled quietly. The usurer I've been working with promised he could arrange a favorable placement, someone who'd treat you well. A placement." Felicity's laugh was bitter. "Like I'm furniture." "Like you're valuable," Victoria corrected. "Human companions to vampire nobility live very comfortable lives, Felicity. You'd have been cared for, protected, given luxuries you could never dream of in this house. It would have been a mercy." "Without my consent." "You're 22 years old and you have nothing," Victoria said flatly. "No prospects, no skills beyond bookkeeping, no family who wants you. I was giving you a future. You were using me." Felicity looked down at the white gown in her arms, the tag that read, "Remember this," in that precise, elegant hand. Someone had seen. Someone had witnessed Victoria's cruelty, had heard every word, and had decided it required answer. "Who is CL?" Victoria went white again. "It doesn't matter. You're not—" "Who?" "Casimir Lavar," said a voice from the doorway, quiet and cold as winter midnight. "And you should listen to your stepmother, Miss Marlowe. My attention is rarely a gift." Everyone turned. The man standing in the open doorway was tall, slim, and so pale he seemed to glow in the morning light filtering through the windows. His hair was white blonde, pulled back in a style that belonged to old paintings, and his eyes were the color of mercury silver gray and utterly lightless. He wore a black suit cut with such precision it looked like armor, and when he stepped into the house the temperature dropped 5 degrees. Vampire. Obviously, undeniably vampire. Felicity had seen vampires before everyone had, but never one like this. Never one who radiated power like cold radiated from ice, quiet and absolute. "Your Majesty," Victoria whispered, and dropped into a curtsy so low she nearly hit the floor. Majesty. King. Felicity's stomach dropped. Casimir Lavar didn't look at Victoria. His eyes were fixed on Felicity, assessing her with the same attention someone might give to a painting they were considering purchasing. "You opened them," he said. "Good." Felicity's mouth was dry. "I didn't know who sent them." "You do now." He moved further into the room, graceful and deliberate. "Do they fit?" "I haven't tried them on." "Try them on." It wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. "I had your measurements taken from the dress your stepmother destroyed. If the seamstress erred, I'll have her corrected." "How did you—" Felicity stopped. "You were there, last night. You saw. I was passing by. Your stepmother conducts her cruelties with the curtains open." Casimir's gaze flicked to Victoria for the first time, and the woman flinched. "Careless, Mrs. Marlowe. One should always be aware of who might be watching." "Your Majesty, I didn't mean to advertise the abuse of your stepdaughter." Casimir's tone was mild, almost conversational. "Or didn't mean to alert me to the fact that you've been hiding her from your creditors?" Victoria made a sound like she'd been struck. Casimir returned his attention to Felicity. "Your stepmother owes my court a considerable sum. She's been negotiating with Matthias Thorne, a usurer of notably poor reputation, to settle the debt by delivering you as collateral to Lord Varick, who has certain appetites that make him unsuitable for polite company. I assume you were unaware of this arrangement." Felicity's vision blurred at the edges. "I was. You're aware now." Casimir tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You have 3 options. 1. You return the gowns, and I walk away. Your stepmother continues her arrangement with Thorne, and you wake up one morning in Varick's estate with no memory of how you got there. 2. You keep the gowns and accept my protection, which means entering into a contract with the Obscura court and becoming my concern. 3. You run, right now, and hope you can disappear before either Thorne or I find you." "That's not 3 options," Felicity said, her voice shaking. "That's 1 option and 2 different ways to die." Something flickered across Casimir's face, surprise maybe, or amusement. "You're more astute than your stepmother. Yes, it's 1 option, Miss Marlowe. I'm giving you the courtesy of choosing it yourself." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." "No," Casimir agreed, "but I witnessed 12 separate cruelties last night, spoken by a woman who had no right to speak them, against someone who had done nothing to deserve them. And I have always believed that debts run both ways. Miss Marlowe, your stepmother created a debt when she burned your gown and spoke those words. She created an obligation. I'm simply fulfilling it. By sending dresses. By offering correction." Casimir's eyes were very steady on hers. "And by making sure you understand that you have value beyond what your stepmother has told you. The gowns are proof. Wear them or burn them, that's your choice. But know that as long as they exist, you are under my protection, and anyone who harms you answers to me." Felicity looked down at the white gown in her arms, then at the 11 boxes scattered around the hallway, then at Victoria's terrified face. Her stepmother was shaking, pressed against the wall like she wanted to melt through it. "What happens to them?" Felicity asked quietly. "If I accept your protection, what happens to my stepmother and stepsisters?" "The debt still exists," Casimir said, "but it becomes my concern, not Thorne's. I'll decide how it's settled, and I assure you my terms will be significantly more civilized than Varick's appetites." "You'll hurt them." "I'll hold them accountable." Casimir's expression didn't change. "There's a difference." Felicity thought about 3 years of cruelty, 3 years of insults and slaps and being treated like a burden, a mistake, a thing to be used and discarded. 3 years of watching her stepsisters wear pretty dresses while she patched her own clothes, of eating leftovers while they had full meals, of being sent out in the rain to run errands while they lounged in the drawing room. 3 years of being told she was nothing. "I'll keep the gowns," she said. Victoria made a broken sound. "Felicity, please." "Quiet," Casimir said, and Victoria's mouth snapped shut like he'd pulled a string. He looked at Felicity. "Then we have an agreement. You're under my protection as of this moment. Gather what you need from this house. You won't be returning." "What?" "You're coming with me." Casimir gestured to the boxes. "My staff will collect these. Take anything else of value to you. I'll give you 10 minutes. "I don't—" Felicity's heart hammered. "I don't understand. Where are we going?" "My estate. You'll stay there until I've settled matters with Thorne and determined the extent of your stepmother's obligations." Casimir checked a pocket watch that looked like it belonged in a museum. 9 minutes now. I suggest you hurry." He wasn't giving her a choice. Not really. Felicity looked at Victoria one more time, searching for some sign of remorse, some indication that the woman regretted anything she'd done. But Victoria's face showed only fear and calculation, already trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. Felicity turned and ran upstairs. Her room was small, shabby, tucked under the eaves. She grabbed a bag and threw in what little she owned clothes, mostly her few books, the photograph of her father she kept hidden under her mattress. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely zip the bag closed. This was insane. She was leaving with a vampire king she didn't know, accepting protection she didn't understand, stepping into a world she'd only ever glimpsed from a distance. But the alternative was waiting here for Thorne's people to come collect her, waiting to be handed over to some vampire lord with appetites that made even Victoria go pale. She'd take her chances with Casimir Lavar. When she came back downstairs, the boxes were gone and a sleek black car was waiting at the curb. Casimir stood by the open door, patient as a statue. Victoria and her daughters were nowhere to be seen, probably locked in the drawing room, afraid to come out. "That was 8 minutes," Casimir observed. "Well done." Felicity didn't answer. She climbed into the car, and Casimir slid in beside her, and the door closed with a quiet, final click. The estate was not what Felicity expected. She'd imagined something Gothic, ancient, all stone towers and dark windows. Instead, the car pulled up to a modern mansion on the outskirts of the city, all clean lines and glass surrounded by meticulously kept grounds. It was beautiful in a cold, precise way, like everything else about Casimir. "You'll have your own wing," Casimir said as they walked through the front doors into a foyer that soared 3 stories high. "My household staff will provide anything you need. You're free to move about the estate, use the library, the gardens. The only rule is that you don't leave the grounds without my knowledge." "Am I a prisoner?" Felicity asked. "You're protected." Casimir glanced at her. "There's a difference. You keep saying that because you keep failing to understand it." He led her through a series of hallways, each one more elegant than the last, filled with art that probably cost more than her father's entire estate. "Thorne will come looking for you. Varric will be displeased that his purchase has been intercepted. You're safer here than anywhere else in the city until I've resolved the situation." "How long will that take?" "As long as necessary." Casimir stopped at a door and opened it, revealing a suite of rooms that took Felicity's breath away. The bedroom was enormous, decorated in soft grays and whites, with windows overlooking gardens that seemed to go on forever. There was a bathroom with a tub the size of a small pool, a sitting room with shelves full of books, and a closet that, "Oh," Felicity breathed. All 12 gowns were hanging in the closet, perfectly arranged by color. They looked even more beautiful here, in this space, than they had in the shabby hallway of her stepmother's house. "You'll dress for dinner," Casimir said from behind her. 6 o'clock. A staff member will come to escort you." He paused. "Wear the blue one, the midnight blue. I want to see if it fits properly." Felicity turned to face him. "Why are you doing this?" "I've already explained." "No, not the protection, not the contract. Why did you send the gowns? Why did you care?" She searched his face, looking for some hint of warmth, some human emotion. "You're a vampire king. You could have just claimed me from Victoria, settled the debt however you wanted. Why go through all this?" Casimir was quiet for a long moment, his mercury eyes unreadable. "Because burning someone's only beautiful thing is a particular kind of cruelty," he said finally, "and I have very little tolerance for that particular kind." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click, leaving Felicity alone in a room fit for royalty with 12 gowns and more questions than answers. Dinner was a strange, formal affair. Felicity wore the midnight blue gown. It fit perfectly, like it had been made on her body rather than from stolen measurements, and was escorted by a silent staff member through the mansion to a dining room that could have seated 30. Casimir sat at the head of a table long enough to use as a bowling lane and gestured for her to take the seat to his right. "You look appropriate," he said, which might have been a compliment. "Thank you for the gown," Felicity replied, settling into her chair. "And the other 11. You've counted them." "I've done little else." Felicity accepted a glass of wine from a server who appeared and vanished like smoke. "That and try to understand what's happening to me." "I've explained what's happening." "You've explained the mechanics, not the why." Felicity sipped her wine. It was extraordinary, probably older than she was. "Vampire kings don't intervene in domestic disputes between humans. Everyone knows that. You have your world, we have ours, and the two don't overlap except in very specific circumstances. So why am I here?" Casimir cut into something on his plate that looked like steak but smelled wrong, too rich, too metallic. Felicity tried not to think about what vampires ate. Your stepmother involved my court when she borrowed money from it. That made it my business. She borrowed from Thorn, not from you. Thorn operates with my permission. Everything that happens in the city's vampire community happens with my knowledge or my explicit allowance. Casimir's tone was matter-of-fact. Your stepmother's debt is registered with the Obscura court. The contract she signed gives Thorn the right to collect, but it also gives me the right to intervene if I determine the collection methods violate our codes. And selling me to Lord Varric violates your codes? Lord Varric violates several codes simply by existing, but he's old and powerful enough that removing him would cause more problems than it solves. Casimir met her eyes. Delivering you to him, however, would violate codes regarding informed consent and human agency. Your stepmother never told you about the debt or the contract. She planned to have you taken without your knowledge. That's unacceptable. So this is about following rules. This is about ensuring that my court operates with honor. Casimir set down his fork. We are not monsters, Miss Marlowe, regardless of what your stories say. We have laws, we have standards, and when someone under our jurisdiction violates those standards, we correct them. By sending gowns. By making a point. Casimir leaned back in his chair, studying her. Your stepmother needed to understand that you are not hers to dispose of. Thorn needed to understand that I'm aware of his arrangement and disapprove. And you needed to understand that you have value beyond what you've been told. So the gowns were a message. Everything is a message. Miss Marlowe, the only question is whether the recipient is wise enough to read it. Felicity thought about the tags, each one refuting one of Victoria's insults. You heard everything she said to me. I was directly outside the window. Your stepmother has a carrying voice. And you remembered all 12 insults. I remember everything. Casimir's expression didn't change. It's a curse of age. Nothing fades. Nothing's forgotten. How old are you? Old enough to find this conversation tedious. But there was something in his voice that suggested he was lying, that he was not in fact bored at all. Eat your dinner, Miss Marlowe. You'll need your strength. For what? Tomorrow I'm taking you to meet Thorn. You'll need to formally refuse the contract he made with your stepmother, which will allow me to void it on grounds of non-consent. Casimir's eyes glinted. He won't be pleased. I suspect it will be educational for you to see how vampire negotiations are conducted. Felicity's stomach nodded. Will I be safe? You're with me. Casimir said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You'll be safe. And somehow, impossibly, Felicity believed him. Matthias Thorn operated out of a building in the Old District, the part of the city where vampire businesses clustered together and humans ventured only when they had no other choice. The building itself was beautiful in a decaying way, all ornate stonework and stained glass, but it felt wrong, too quiet, too cold, like something was watching from the shadows. Casimir walked in like he owned the place, Felicity close behind him, her heart hammering against her ribs. Thorn was waiting in an office that smelled of old leather and something sweet and rotten. He was smaller than Felicity expected, round-faced and smiling, with the white skin and hair all vampires shared, but none of Casimir's elegance. He looked like a clerk, harmless and forgettable. Your Majesty, Thorn said, rising from his desk with a bow that managed to be both respectful and mocking. What an unexpected pleasure, and you've brought the girl. How convenient. Miss Marlowe is here to formally refuse your contract, Casimir said without preamble. I'm here to witness it and ensure you understand the consequences of attempting to enforce a claim she never consented to. Thorn's smile widened. Consent is a complicated concept, Your Majesty. The contract was signed by her legal guardian, who had no authority to sell her into servitude without her knowledge, Casimir cut in. You know the law, Thorn. Human collateral requires informed consent from the collateral in question. Mrs. Marlowe never informed her stepdaughter of the debt or the terms. Your contract is invalid. That's a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of fact. Casimir's voice dropped several degrees. And if you continue to argue, I'll have the adjudicators review every contract you've written in the past 50 years. I suspect they'll find several other instances of creative interpretation that violate our codes. Thorn's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. You're interfering with legitimate business, Your Majesty. I'm preventing you from trafficking an uninformed human to a vampire with a documented history of abuse. Casimir moved closer to the desk, and Thorne took an involuntary step back. Miss Marlowe, tell him. Felicity's mouth was dry. I refused the contract. I was never informed of its terms, never given the chance to consent, and I want nothing to do with it or with Lord Varick. There, Casimir said, witnessed and recorded. The contract is void. The debt still exists. Oh, Thorne said quickly. Mrs. Marlowe still owes. Mrs. Marlowe's debt is being transferred to my personal accounts. You'll be compensated for your principal investment plus reasonable interest, calculated according to court standards, not your usual usurious rates. Casimir produced a document from his jacket and laid it on the desk. The paperwork is in order. You have 48 hours to review and sign. If you refuse, I'll take the matter to the adjudicators and let them determine fair compensation. I suspect you'll prefer my offer. Thorne stared at the document like it was a snake. You're taking the debt yourself? I'm resolving a situation that reflects poorly on my court. Casimir's tone was arctic. Your arrangement with Varick was sloppy. Thorne, it exposed us to human scrutiny and violated protocols that exist for good reason. Consider yourself fortunate that I'm offering compensation at all rather than simply shutting you down. You can't. I'm king. Casimir said it quietly, but the words resonated like a bell. I can do whatever I determine necessary to maintain order and honor in my court. Would you like to test the limits of that authority? Thorne went very still. For a moment, Felicity thought he might refuse, might push back, but then his shoulders slumped and he reached for the document. 48 hours. Good. Casimir turned to leave, then paused. And Thorne? If I hear that you've contacted Mrs. Marlowe, her daughters, or Miss Marlowe herself, I'll consider it a violation of our agreement and act accordingly. Am I clear? Crystal, Your Majesty. Outside, in the cold morning air, Felicity let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was terrifying. That was business. Casimir guided her toward the car with a hand on her lower back, the touch proprietary but not aggressive. Thorne is a coward. He'll sign the paperwork and slink away to find some other scheme. You won't hear from him again. And my stepmother? Her debt transfers to me, which means I'll determine how it's settled. Casimir opened the car door for her. I'm considering several options, none of which involve selling you to Lord Varick. Felicity slid into the car, her mind spinning. Why are you doing this? And don't say it's about honor or codes or messages. There's something else, something you're not telling me. Casimir was quiet as he settled into the seat beside her, his mercury eyes distant. When you've lived as long as I have, he said finally, you see patterns. You see the same cruelties repeated across centuries, the same abuses dressed in different clothing. Your stepmother is not unique. Women like her exist in every era, in every culture. They take vulnerable people and grind them down, tell them they're worthless, make them believe they deserve nothing better. He looked at her. I'm tired of seeing it, and I'm in a position to do something about it. So I am. By sending dresses. By making sure you understand that you're worth more than your stepmother's cruelty. Casimir's gaze was steady. The dresses are proof, Miss Marlowe. Tangible, beautiful proof that you are valued, that you deserve beautiful things, that someone noticed you were wronged and decided it mattered. Felicity felt something crack in her chest, something that had been holding tight for 3 years. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Casimir looked away, out the window. Just wear the dresses. That's enough. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Felicity spent her mornings exploring the estate, her afternoons in the library, reading books about vampire history and culture, and her evenings dining with Casimir in that enormous dining room. They talked about everything art, music, philosophy, the differences between human and vampire society. Casimir was cool and precise, rarely showing emotion, but he listened when she spoke and remembered everything she said. And slowly, carefully, Felicity began to see the person beneath the king. He brought her flowers because she'd mentioned liking the gardens. He found her a rare book on textile history because she'd expressed interest in how the gowns were made. He adjusted the household schedule so she could sleep late because he'd noticed she was tired. Small things, quiet things, actions instead of words. The gowns hung in her closet like promises. She wore a different one each evening, and every time Casimir would nod approval and make some minute observation, the way the silver one caught the light, how the emerald brought out her eyes, the perfect drape of the rose gold across her shoulders. He noticed everything. "You're watching me," Felicity said one evening, 3 weeks into her stay. "I'm observing," Casimir corrected. "There's a difference. You stare at me like I'm a puzzle you're trying to solve." "Perhaps you are." Casimir set down his wineglass. "You're not what I expected, Miss Marlowe." "What did you expect?" "Someone broken, someone grateful, someone who would accept protection and ask no questions." He leaned back in his chair. "You've asked nothing but questions since you arrived. You've explored every room you're allowed to access, read a dozen books on vampire law, and yesterday I caught you interrogating my head of staff about court protocols. You're not content to simply be protected. You want to understand the system that required protection in the first place." "Is that a problem?" "It's refreshing." Something that might have been a smile touched Casimir's mouth. "I'm accustomed to fear or sycophancy. You offer neither. Should I be afraid of you?" "Probably." Casimir's eyes were steady on hers. "I'm old, powerful, and not particularly patient with incompetence or disobedience. I've killed people for lesser offenses than the questions you've asked me. But you won't kill me." "No," Casimir agreed. "I won't kill you." "Why not?" "Because you're interesting." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "And I've lived long enough that interesting is rare and valuable." Felicity felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm not that interesting. You survived 3 years of systematic cruelty without losing yourself. You refused to be broken. You made a dress by hand over 6 months because you wanted something beautiful in a life that gave you nothing beautiful. You looked at a vampire king and asked why, instead of bowing and thanking me for my generosity." Casimir's gaze was intense. "You're interesting, Miss Marlowe. Don't diminish that. You're being kind." "I'm being accurate. I don't do kind." But the way he said it suggested he was lying again. That night, alone in her room with 12 gowns and a head full of questions, Felicity admitted something to herself. She was falling in love with Casimir Lavar. It was insane. He was a vampire, a king, centuries old and dangerous and utterly beyond her reach. But he'd seen her at her lowest moment and responded not with pity, but with action. He'd given her protection, safety, beauty, and respect. He'd listened to her and remembered what she said and cared enough to bring her flowers. And the way he looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth his time and attention, made her feel more valued than she'd felt in years. She was in so much trouble. The revelation came a week later, during a dinner that started like all the others and ended with everything changing. Casimir seemed restless, his usual composure fractured. He barely touched his food, his attention somewhere distant, and finally he set down his fork and said, "I've settled your stepmother's debt." Felicity's heart jumped. "How?" "I've seized her house and accounts. The property will be sold, the proceeds applied to the debt principal. Your stepmother and stepsisters will be provided a modest living allowance and housing in a smaller property, enough to survive but not thrive." Casimir's tone was flat. "They'll experience a fraction of the hardship they put you through. It seems proportionate. You're taking everything from them. I'm taking what they took from you, your security, your comfort, your sense of safety." Casimir met her eyes. "They'll survive, Miss Marlowe. They'll simply survive with significantly less than they've become accustomed to. Is that unacceptable to you?" Felicity thought about 3 years of cruelty, of casual violence, of being told she was nothing. "No," she said quietly. "It's not unacceptable." "Good." Casimir stood, moving to the window. "There's another matter. The house sale will take time, but in the interim, I've identified a property that might interest you." "Me." "A dressmaker's atelier in the city center. It's been vacant for 2 years, but the owner is willing to sell. I thought you might want it." Felicity stared at him. "You want to buy me a business?" "I want to give you options." Casimir didn't turn from the window. "You can't stay here indefinitely, Miss Marlowe. You're human. You have a life to build. If dressmaking interests you and your comments suggest it does, then you should have the opportunity to pursue it properly." I don't know anything about running a business. You managed your stepmother's household accounts for 3 years. You can learn. Casimir's shoulders were tense, unless you'd prefer a different arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Finally he turned, and his eyes were strange, uncertain, almost vulnerable. You could stay, here, permanently. Felicity's breath caught. As what? As mine. Casimir crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping just in front of her chair. I'm offering you a place in my household, Miss Marlowe, not as staff, not as collateral, as my companion, my partner, with all the protection and privilege that entails. You mean as your human pet? Felicity's voice was sharper than she intended. I mean as someone I value. Casimir's jaw tightened. I don't take companions lightly. I haven't had one in a century. But you... He stopped, seemed to search for words. You've been here a month, and I find myself arranging my schedule around meals so I can talk to you. I notice what you wear. I care whether you're comfortable. I brought you flowers because I wanted to see you smile. This is not I don't do this. I don't care about people like this. But I care about you. And I'm offering you a place at my side if you want it. Felicity's heart was racing. What does that mean? Practically? It means you stay here. You're under my protection permanently. You want for nothing. Casimir hesitated. We build something, together. I don't know what it looks like. I've never done this before. But I know I don't want you to leave, and I'm hoping you don't want to leave either. And if I do want to leave, if I want the atelier and my own life, then I buy you the atelier and help you establish your business and step back. Casimir's voice was tight. I won't hold you here against your will, Miss Marlowe. I've spent the past month ensuring you understand you have choices. I'm not going to take those choices away now. Felicity stood, bringing them eye to eye. You're asking me to choose between independence and you. I'm asking you to consider that you might be able to have both. Casimir's hands clenched at his sides, like he wanted to reach for her but wouldn't let himself. I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm asking to be part of it, to support you, protect you, care for you, in whatever way you'll allow. Why? Felicity whispered. Why me? Because you saw me burn your only beautiful thing and decided the correct response was to send 12 better ones. Because you asked questions when everyone else shows fear. Because you're strong and clever and you don't apologize for taking up space. Casimir's voice dropped. Because when I look at you, I feel something I haven't felt in 200 years, and I'm terrified of losing it. Felicity's breath caught. What do you feel? Hope, Casimir said simply. That maybe I'm not just an old monster playing at civilization, that maybe there's still something in me worth caring about. You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things. So have I. Felicity thought of the small, vicious part of her that was glad Victoria would lose her house, glad her stepsisters would suffer. Being hurt doesn't make you a monster. It makes you a person. Casimir's eyes searched hers. Is that what you see when you look at me? A person. I see someone who noticed I was being hurt and decided it mattered. Someone who sent 12 gowns instead of just taking what he wanted. Someone who cares about honor and rules and making sure people who can't protect themselves are protected anyway. Felicity reached up, touched his face. He was cold under her palm, marble smooth. I see someone worth caring about. Casimir closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like it was the first gentle thing anyone had offered him in centuries. Stay, he whispered. Please. On one condition, Felicity said. His eyes opened. Name it. I want the atelier. I want to learn the business, build something of my own. But I want to do it from here, with you. She smiled. I want both, Casimir. Independence and you. Can you give me that? Yes. The word came out fierce, certain. Yes, whatever you want, however you want it. Then I'll stay. Casimir kissed her then, careful and intense, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. His hands came up to frame her face, holding her steady, and Felicity felt the last locked places inside her break open. She'd been alone for so long, afraid for so long, and here was someone offering her safety and care and a partnership that didn't require her to diminish herself. Here was someone who saw her and valued her and wanted her to thrive. When they broke apart, Casimir rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "It's been so long. I'll make mistakes." "So will I." Felicity's hands settled on his chest, feeling the stillness there, no heartbeat, but something else, some core of self that was entirely Casimir. "We'll figure it out together." "Together," Casimir repeated, like he was testing the word. Then, softer, "I like the sound of that." The months that followed were a study in building something new. Casimir bought the atelier and hired instructors to teach Felicity everything from pattern making to business management. She threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once poured into surviving Victoria's cruelty, and discovered she had a gift for it, an eye for design, a head for numbers, an instinct for what would sell. The business grew slowly but steadily, and Casimir was there for all of it, offering advice when she asked, handling the legal complications of permits and contracts, sitting in her workroom late at night while she sketched designs and talking through ideas. "You should do a line for vampire formal events," he suggested one evening, watching her work. "There's a gap in the market. Most vampire fashion is stuck in the 18th century. You could modernize it." "Would vampires buy from a human designer?" "They'd buy from my companion." Casimir's tone was matter of fact. "And your work is excellent. Pride will carry you far in vampire circles." Felicity looked at him, this ancient, powerful being who believed in her talent enough to stake his reputation on it. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can do this." Casimir moved behind her chair, hands settling on her shoulders. "You're brilliant, Felicity. Stop being surprised when people notice." She leaned back into him, letting his cold solidity ground her. "I love you," she said, the words easy now after months of practice. "Have I mentioned that today?" "Not since this morning." His lips brushed her temple. "But I don't tire of hearing it." "Good. Because I'm going to keep saying it." "Please do." Casimir's arms wrapped around her, holding her close. "It's my favorite sound in the world." A year after the night Victoria burned her gown, Felicity stood in her atelier surrounded by elegant chaos, bolts of fabric, half-finished designs, the organized disorder of a business in motion, and felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel: happy. The shop had become exactly what she'd dreamed, a place where girls who couldn't afford couture could commission beautiful dresses, where women came to feel valued and seen. She'd built a reputation for quality and fairness, and the business was thriving. And every evening, Casimir would arrive to walk her home, his presence a quiet constant in her life. "I have something for you," he said that evening as they settled into the car. "Another gift?" "Casimir, you've given me enough." "It's not a gift. It's a choice." He handed her an envelope, heavy cream paper sealed with the Obscura court sigil. Felicity opened it with careful fingers and found a single page, dense with legal text. It took her a moment to parse the formal language, and then her breath caught. "This is a petition for turning," she whispered. "It's an option." Casimir's voice was carefully neutral. "Not a demand, not even a request, just information. If you wanted to live longer, to have more time, to not age while I stay the same, the option exists, but only if you want it." Felicity stared at the document. Turning. Becoming vampire. Immortal, powerful, cold, but also free of human fragility, able to stand beside Casimir as an equal, rather than someone he'd outlived by centuries. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to be happy." Casimir took her hand, laced their fingers together. "Human or vampire, mortal or immortal, I want you exactly as you are. But I also want you to have all the information, to understand what's possible." "Would it change me? Who I am?" "You'd still be you. Just faster, stronger, harder to kill." Casimir's thumb traced circles on her palm, "and you'd have time, centuries of time to build your business, to create, to live without the pressure of mortality." "And you?" Felicity looked at him. "Would it change us?" "It would mean I could stop pretending I'm not terrified of losing you." Casimir's voice cracked slightly. "Humans are so fragile, Felicity. Every time you get sick, every time you're tired, I'm reminded that you're temporary, that one day I'll wake up and you'll be gone. If you turned, I wouldn't have to carry that fear anymore." Felicity set the document aside and cupped his face in both hands. I need time to think about this. Take all the time you need. Casimir turned to kiss her palm. There's no deadline, no pressure. Just know that the option exists, that if you wanted it, I would support you completely. Even if I said no? Even then, his eyes were steady. I love you, Felicity. Whatever you choose, that doesn't change. She thought about it for weeks, talked to vampires who'd been turned, asked questions about what it meant, what it felt like, what she'd gain and what she'd lose. Casimir answered everything honestly, never pushing, never indicating what he wanted her to choose. But she saw the hope in his eyes every time she brought it up, the careful way he explained the process, the relief when she didn't immediately refuse. He wanted this, wanted her to stay. And she realized, slowly, that she wanted it too. Not because she was afraid of aging or dying, not because she wanted power or immortality for its own sake, but because she'd built a life she loved, found work that fulfilled her, and fallen in love with someone who made her better. And she wanted more time, wanted to see where her business could go in a century rather than a handful of decades, wanted to stand beside Casimir as an equal, without the shadow of mortality hanging over them. I want to turn, she told him one evening, the words simple and certain. Casimir went very still. You're sure? I'm sure. Felicity took his hands. I want this life, Casimir. I want you. I want time. I want all of it. It's permanent, he warned. Once you turn, there's no going back. I know, she smiled. I'm not going back anyway. I'm going forward with you. Casimir pulled her close, his arms tight around her. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for choosing this, for choosing me. Always, Felicity promised, for as long as we have. Then we have forever. The turning happened on a quiet night 3 months later, after Felicity had settled her affairs and made her preparations. Casimir performed the ritual himself in the privacy of their rooms, gentle and careful, walking her through every step. It hurt less than she expected, and more than she'd prepared for a burning in her veins, a sense of everything shifting and reforming. And then a clarity, sharp and bright, like the world had come into sudden focus. She opened her eyes to find Casimir watching her, his expression raw with something that might have been joy. How do you feel? He asked. Felicity took inventory. Everything was sharper sounds, scents, the feeling of air against her skin. She was stronger, she could tell, her body humming with new power. And she was hungry, a deep ache that Casimir satisfied with blood he'd prepared, teaching her to feed carefully, to control the urge. I feel like myself, she said finally. Just more. Good. Casimir gathered her close. That's exactly right. You're still you. You'll always be you. Just with a lot more time to be annoying, Felicity teased. I'm looking forward to it. Casimir's smile was real, warm, the expression of someone who'd been alone for centuries and finally found home. Every second of it. 5 years after Victoria burned her only ball gown, Felicity stood in her expanded atelier, now a full-fashion house with 3 locations and a staff of 20, and prepared for the event she'd been planning for months. The 12 original gowns hung on display in the center of the showroom, each one perfect and beautiful and tagged with its original message. And surrounding them were racks of new dresses created by Felicity and her team, ready to be given away. Are you certain about this? Casimir asked, his hand on her lower back. Completely. Felicity looked at the gowns, remembering the girl she'd been small, scared, convinced she was worthless. These dresses saved me. They reminded me I had value when everyone in my life was telling me I didn't. Now I want to do that for other people. The event was simple. Girls who couldn't afford formal wear could come, try on dresses, and take one home free of charge. No questions, no judgment, just beautiful things offered to people who deserved beautiful things. The line wrapped around the block. Felicity worked the floor herself, helping girls find gowns that fit, adjusting hems, offering encouragement. She saw herself in so many of them, the ones who looked shocked that anyone would give them something nice, the ones who apologized for taking up space, the ones who'd been told they weren't worth beauty. You deserve this, she told each one. Remember that. You deserve beautiful things. And when a girl left wearing a gown that made her feel valued, Felicity felt the circle complete. She'd been saved by 12 dresses and the vampire who sent them. Now she was passing that salvation forward, one gown at a time. Casimir watched from the corner, his expression soft. When the last girl had left and the staff was cleaning up, he crossed to Felicity and pulled her into his arms. "You're extraordinary," he murmured. "Do you know that? I learned it from you." Felicity rested her head against his chest. "You taught me that actions matter, that noticing when someone's hurting and choosing to do something about it, that's what makes the difference. I only sent dresses. You sent proof that I mattered. That's everything." She looked up at him. "Thank you for seeing me, for caring, for giving me time to become this." "Thank you for staying," Casimir replied, "for choosing this life, for choosing me. Best decision I ever made." They stood there in the quiet atelier, surrounded by beautiful dresses and the evidence of lives changed, and Felicity thought about the girl she'd been alone, hurting, convinced she was nothing. That girl had been wrong. She was everything. And she had centuries ahead to prove it, with the vampire king who'd noticed her pain and decided it required correction standing beside her every step of the way. The 12 original gowns stayed on permanent display in the flagship atelier, each one a reminder of where she'd started and how far she'd come. And every girl who passed through her doors saw them, saw the tags, and understood. Someone had seen a woman being hurt and decided she deserved better. That was the real gift. Not the dresses themselves, but the message they carried. You matter, you're worthy, you deserve beauty and care and someone who will fight for you. Felicity had learned that lesson from 12 gowns and a vampire king. Now she spent eternity teaching it to others, one dress at a time. And in the quiet moments, late at night when the atelier was closed and she and Casimir were alone, she'd think about Victoria living modestly now, her power gone, her cruelty answered, and feel not triumph but peace. Justice had been served, not through revenge, but through someone noticing wrong and choosing to correct it. That was Casimir's gift. Not violence, not destruction, but careful, precise correction. Taking what was broken and making it right. He'd done that for her. And now, together, they did it for others. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living, worth fighting for, worth choosing again and again across centuries. And it had all started with 12 gowns, sent by a vampire king who believed that burning someone's only beautiful thing required answer. Felicity wore those gowns sometimes, on special occasions, and every time Casimir would see her and smile that rare, warm smile he saved only for her. "Still fits," he'd observe. "Still perfect," she'd reply. And they'd go out into their life together, immortal, powerful, deeply in love, and continue building something beautiful. One choice at a time, one kindness at a time, one dress at a time, forever.